Friends, I you want to watch super hit movie Transporter 3 in English. Then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Transporter 3. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which OT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the ends. So let's start the video. Transporter 3 is a 2008 English-language French action film directed by Olivier Megaton. It is the final installment in the original trilogy of the Transporter film franchise, but not the last movie, since it was succeeded by the Transporter Refueled, also called Transporter 4, 2015. Jason Statham and Francois Berléand reprise their roles as Frank Martin and Inspector Tarconi. Frank Martin returns to France in order to continue his low-key business of delivering packages without question. Transporter 3 grossed $112.9 million, making it the highest-grossing film in the trilogy. Plot: on a cargo ship at sea, two workers open a shipping container to discover barrels of toxic waste and succumb to the deadly fumes. The ship's captain, aware of the cargo, disposes of their bodies. Meanwhile, having returned from Miami to the French Riviera, Frank Martin is unsuccessfully fishing with his friend Inspector Tarconi, who receives a call about a black Audi A8 that sped through French customs and evaded police. In Odessa, Ukrainian Environmental Agency Minister Leonid Tomalenko receives a threat from corrupt EcoCorp official Jonas Johnson to reopen business negotiations. That night, the Audi crashes into Frank's home, driven by wounded transporter Malcolm Melville, whom Frank had referred when he declined a previous job. As paramedics take Malcolm away, Frank discovers a passenger in the back seat who warns him not to take her from the car. Frank realizes the metal bracelets she and Malcolm are wearing will detonate if they are too far from the vehicle, but the ambulance explodes, killing Malcolm. Knocked unconscious by one of Johnson's henchmen, Frank wakes up wearing an explosive bracelet, and Johnson forces him to drive a package in Malcolm's passenger, Valentina, to Budapest. EcoCorp, having arranged a secret deal with Tomalenko to allow the ship full of toxic waste into the country, tells him to expect another 7 ships. Given 1 day to sign EcoCorp's agreement, Tomalenko sends his own agents to learn Frank's destination from the GPS in Malcolm's car. While Tarconi researches Johnson's motives, Frank goes off course to visit his mechanic friend Otto. Johnson's men arrive to order them back on the road, and Frank fights them off, but Otto is unable to disarm the explosive transmitter inside the car. Frank reaches Budapest, but one of Johnson's men steals the Audi with Valentina inside. Chasing them down by bicycle, Frank recovers the car, and Johnson redirects him to Bucharest. Pursued by Tomalenko's agents in a black Mercedes-Benz E-Class, Frank maneuvers them off a cliff and realizes Valentina is the real package. Taking the car keys, Valentina forces Frank to strip for her, and they have sex. She is revealed to be Tomalenko's daughter, who was drugged in Ibiza and transported by Malcolm for Johnson to blackmail her father. Johnson redirects Frank and Valentina to Odessa, ambushing them on a bridge. Valentina is captured and her bracelet is removed, while Frank drives into the lake and Johnson leaves him to die. Underwater, Frank uses air from the car's tires to inflate a large plastic bag, buoying the car to the surface where he is rescued by Tarconi and the Ukrainian police. Boarding a train with Valentina, Johnson gives Tomalenko 15 minutes to sign the contract. Frank jumps the Audi on top of the train and kills Johnson's men, only to realize that Johnson is too far from the car for him to reach. Johnson uncouples the train cabs, leaving himself and Valentina on one train car and Frank on another. Frank manages to get to the Audi, jumping his car into the next cab with Johnson and Valentina. The two men fight. Frank subdues Johnson and takes his key, attached the bracelet to Johnson instead, and sends the Audi into reverse. Johnson is killed when the bracelet detonates, and Frank reunites with Valentina. Tomalenko learns from Tarconi that Valentina is safe and tears up the EcoCorp contracts, while the cargo ship is raided by police. Frank and Tarconi return to fishing in Marseille, joined by Valentina. Cast: Jason Statham as Frank Martin, Natalya Rudakova as Valentina Tomalenko, François Berléand as Inspector Tarconi, Robert Nepper as Jonas Johnson, Jérôme Crabet as Leonid Tomalenko, Alex Kobold as Leonid's aide, Kadyachenko as Leonid's secretary, David Atrocchi as Malcolm Manville, Jan Sundberg as Flag, Eric Ebuani as Ice, David Kamenos as Driver Market, Silvio Simak as Mighty Joe, Oscar Relia as Thug Driver, Timo Dierkes as Otto, Igor Kompan as Ukrainian Cop, Paul Barrett as Captain, Aleph Zak as Mate, Michelle Neugarten as Sergei, Farid El-Kwardi as Yuri, Semi Schilt as the Giant. Production: Natalya Rudakova was spotted by Luc Besson on the street as she hurried to her job at a New York City hair salon. He paid for 25 acting lessons over a 6-month period and brought her to audition in Paris before she received the role. Roger Ebert noted the rarity of leading ladies who are heavily freckled. Shooting was initially expected to last for 16 weeks in France. It was also filmed in Odessa, Ukraine. Release: unlike its predecessors, Transporter 3 was released by Lionsgate Films instead of 20th Century Fox in the United States. On its opening weekend, the film opened at number 7 with $12 million. The film grossed $31.7 million in the United States and in Canada and $77.3 million in other countries for a total gross of $109 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film in the Transporter trilogy. Transporter 3 was released on DVD and Blu-ray disc on March 10, 2009 in the United States. 1,108,030 units were sold, bringing in $19.7 million in revenue. Icon Films picked up the rights to distribute the film in the UK and Australia. Review: Transporter 3, Luc Besson's Transporter action series featuring any number of sleek black Audis and Mercs, and Jason Statham breathing heavily through his nose, now crashes into its 3rd episode. Once again, Statham plays Frank Martin, the ice-cool transporter and self-reliant tough guy living on the Côte d'Azur and taking on terrifyingly dangerous missions in return for a fistful of €500 notes. Statham is a relatively entertaining action hero, though he is better in the Crank films. The script is by Besson, but the director is Olivier Megaton, whose surname is the most exciting thing about the film. The star cast of Transporter 3 is not built on ensemble polish, but on deliberate contrasts: steel against act, fire, discipline against chaos, loyalty against control, Jason Statham grounds. The film with his physical precision and understated gravitas. Natalya Rudakova disrupts that order with raw, unpredictable energy. Francois Berléand injects warmth while Robert Nepper injects menace. The result is a film where performances are not merely vehicles for action, but reflections of the larger themes: confinement, control, and reluctant connection. The brilliance of these performances lies not in perfection, but in their tension. The actors do not simply play roles. They embody forces clashing within a world, defined by speed and danger. It is this interplay, this constant push and pull, that elevates Transporter 3 beyond its seats, mechanical thrills, and makes its cast a driving force behind the franchise's endurance. Technical department in Transporter 3 2008. The success of an action thriller is never built on story alone. It is constructed piece by piece like a finely tuned engine by the unseen hands of its technical departments, cinematographers who frame the velocity of movement, editors who decide the rhythm of tension, sound designers who turn silence into suspense, and production designers who sculpt environments where speed and danger feel inevitable. In Transporter 3 2008, directed by Olivier Megaton, these departments form the backbone of the film. While the franchise was already established by Louisier and Corey Ewan in earlier entries, Megaton's approach gave the 3rd installment its own identity: darker, grittier, and more industrial in both tone and texture. Direction: Olivier Megaton's grit and restraint Taking over from Louisier, Olivier Megaton's directorial stamp is unmistakable. Where the earlier films leaned into a sleek, glossy style with near operatic stunt clarity, Transporter 3 gravitates toward grit. Megaton uses a colder color palette, frequent handheld shots, and tighter framing, immersing the audience in Frank Martin's claustrophobic predicament. His stylistic choice was to emphasize confinement, the car as both prison and sanctuary, the bracelet as both leash and weapon. This shift in direction gave the film a heavier, more oppressive atmosphere. It sacrificed some of the clean elegance of Transporter 2's balletic fights, but in return it carved a world that felt dirtier, more dangerous, and grounded in the textures of industrial Europe. Cinematography. Steel, glass, and speed. Cinematographer Giovanni Fiorcoltali captures the bitter, metallic pulse of Transporter 3. The film is drenched in desaturated hues. Grays, blues, and metallic silvers dominate the frame, turning highways, warehouses, and train stations into extensions of Frank's entrapment. Unlike the sunlit extravagance of Transporter 2, this film's visuals are industrial and cold, reflecting the brutal machinery of both politics and crime. The camera lingers on close quarters. Fight sequences, often using handheld movement to mirror the chaos of combat. During chase scenes, Koltalaki employs wide tracking shots intercut with sharp insert edits of tires, engines, and speedometers, highlighting the mechanical intimacy between man and machine. Each car chase feels like a duel, not just between vehicles, but between wheels. The standout sequences, particularly the narrow escape along a riverbank and the climactic train standoff, showcase cinematography that keeps the audience locked inside the speed, never fully allowing them to breathe. Editing. Rhythm of confinement. Editor Camille Demar crafts the film with a fast-paced, almost suffocating rhythm. The cuts are rapid, at times too rapid for purists who prefer clear stunt choreography. Yet, the intention is thematic. The audience is meant to feel Frank's lack of freedom, his inability to control the flow of events. The editing mirrors the ticking time bomb. Structure of the explosive bracelet. Sharp, sudden, and unforgiving. Action. Scenes are layered with kinetic energy, particularly hand-to-hand combat, where cuts between close-ups of fists, torsos, and faces create a fragmented perception of violence. While some critics argued that this undermined the clarity of stunt work, others saw it as a stylistic evolution, a move away from spectacle toward immersion. Production design. Industrial Europe as a cage from garages and ports to decaying warehouses and metallic train interiors. The production design creates an environment of entrapment. Unlike the sleek Miami landscapes of Transporter 2, this film situates itself in grittier European terrains, Eastern European highways, riverbanks, and industrial wastelands. Each location is chosen not for glamour, but for its sense of decay and danger. The car itself, the iconic Audi, becomes a character, its polished steel contrasting the rusting industrial world around it. The explosive bracelets, meanwhile, are designed with stark simplicity, plain, metallic, and clinical, embodying the impersonal cruelty of Johnson's control. Together, these design elements reinforce the theme of mechanical captivity. Sound. Design. Engines as heartbeats. Sound in Transporter 3 is not merely background. It drives the film's intensity. The roar of engines, the screech of tires, and the metallic clang of combat dominate the soundscape. Silence is used sparingly but effectively. Moments of quiet before a chase or fight amplify the tension, making the subsequent explosion of noise even more jarring. Foley work gives texture to every punch, every car collision, every splash of water during the river escape. The sound of chains, engines, and metallic echoes builds a sensory environment where everything feels dangerous, sharp, and alive. Visual effects, practical meets digital. The Transporter franchise is known for practical stunt work, and Transporter 3 maintains that tradition. Though digital effects are occasionally employed, most of the driving sequences use real vehicles with carefully choreographed stunt work. Jason Statham, famed for performing many of his own stunts, lends authenticity to the sequences. However, CGI assists in enhancing moments that would otherwise be impossible or too dangerous, like exaggerated vehicle flips or the train climax. These effects are integrated with practical shots, though the reliance on quick editing sometimes masks their quality. Costume and props function over fashion. Costuming in Transporter 3 is deliberately minimalistic. Jason Statham's Frank Martin remains in his signature tailored black suit, a uniform of professionalism that becomes almost symbolic, his armor against chaos. As the film progresses, the wear and tear on his suit mirrors his gradual unraveling, reminding the audience that even the most disciplined man can be worn down. Valentina's wardrobe, in contrast, is youthful, colorful, and rebellious, visually clashing with Frank's stoic attire. This contrast highlights their dynamic: order versus chaos, restraint versus recklessness. Props, such as the Audi, the bracelets, and the weapons serve not merely as tools, but as narrative devices, constantly reminding the viewer of the stakes, music, and integration with technical design. Though Alexandra Azaria's score belongs more to the musical discussion, its integration with technical departments deserves mention. The rhythmic beats sync perfectly with the editing choices, reinforcing the ticking clock suspense. The blending of techno-driven tracks with orchestral, motifs mirrors the film's duality: cold mechanical danger versus the fragile human emotions of Frank and Valentina. Final reflection: the technical departments of Transporter 3 work in harmony to create an experience defined by confinement and velocity. The cinematography frames speed as both liberation and imprisonment. The editing traps the viewer in a relentless rhythm. The sound design transforms engines into heartbeats, while production design paints Europe as a decaying steel labyrinth. Though the film faced criticism for abandoning the clean clarity of its predecessors, the technical team's intent was thematic: to place the audience inside Frank Martin's trap. Every frame, cut, and sound echoes the reality of being chained to a car, to a mission, to fate itself. The brilliance of Transporter 3 lies not in perfection, but in cohesion. Its technical departments did not aim for elegance. They aimed for immersion. They wanted the audience to feel what Frank feels: the suffocating inevitability of speed, the metallic cage of duty, and the fragile hope of breaking free. Music and emotional resonance in Transporter 3, 2008. Action films often live or die by their ability to sustain energy. But what separates a disposable chase movie from a memorable cinematic experience is the emotional architecture built through music. Transporter 3, 2008 does not rely solely on Jason Statham's fists, the screeching of tires, or the gleam of Audi steel. It relies on the rhythms, tones, and sonic textures that guide the audience through adrenaline and intimacy alike. The film's score and soundscape, orchestrated with precision by composer Alexandra Azaria, become an invisible co-driver in Frank Martin's perilous journey. Alexandra Aria's sonic blueprint. Alexandra Aria, already known in French cinema for blending electronic elements with classical scoring, crafts a sound that mirrors Frank's existence, rigid, mechanical, yet punctuated with bursts of human emotion. The score embraces electronic pulses, techno beats, and percussive rhythms to capture speed and danger, but it also weaves in subdued melodies, almost hesitant in their fragility, when Frank and Valentina begin to connect. This duality is the film's musical core. Fast, relentless beats for the driver who lives by rules, contrasted with tender, melancholic motifs for the man beneath the armor. Zaria's score ensures that Transporter 3 never becomes a mere stunt reel. Instead, it is a journey through sound that underscores every emotional turn, engines, beats, and the pulse of danger. The integration of music with sound design is where the film excels. In chase sequences, the thumping bass and high-tempo electronic layers blend seamlessly with the roar of engines. Each gear shift, each tire screech feels like a note in a larger composition. The music does not just accompany the chase, it becomes the chase, transforming metal and asphalt into instruments. The explosive bracelet concept finds its echo in the music's rhythm. Many cues emphasize repetition, almost like a ticking clock. This creates a subconscious reminder for the audience. Time is a weapon, and every beat is one step closer to detonation. The result is an atmosphere of suffocating urgency, emotional undercurrents, Frank and Valentina's bond. Beneath the surface of industrial beats lies the surprising tenderness of the score. When Frank and Valentina share moments of vulnerability, her playful rebellion, his reluctant warmth, the music shifts. Electronic coldness gives way to softer instrumentation. Piano chords, subdued strings, and ambient tones. These moments, fleeting but vital, provide a release valve from the relentless tension. The emotional resonance here is not sweeping or melodramatic. It is fragile, almost hesitant. Much like Frank himself, the music reveals emotion cautiously, as if unsure whether it is safe to expose vulnerability. By doing so, the score reflects the arc of their relationship. Two people chained by circumstance, discovering humanity in the midst of chaos. Deitic music, songs within the earth. World. One of the distinctive choices in Transporter 3 is the use of deitic music, songs that the characters themselves hear, particularly in Valentina's scenes. Her rebellious personality is underscored by her preference for loud, brash tracks that clash with Frank's disciplined silence. These musical moments are not background noise, they are character development tools. They emphasize Valentina's immaturity and recklessness, while also highlighting the growing clash and eventual attraction between her and Frank. The contrast between Frank's silence and Valentina's impulsive need for music creates a dynamic tension. In one sense, the film uses these tracks to externalize Valentina's spirit, showing her as someone who refuses to be silent even when trapped. This sharpens the thematic difference between the characters. Frank, bound by rules, and Valentina, bound only by her desire to break them. Silence as a musical choice. Equally important is the film's use of silence. In moments where the music drops away, replaced by only the hum of the car engine or the ticking of the bracelet, the absence of sound becomes its own kind of score. Silence amplifies vulnerability. It forces the audience to feel the weight of each second, especially in close quarters dialogue or when Frank must make a life or death choice. These silent beats are crucial because they prevent the film from drowning in constant noise. They create contrast, allowing the return of the score to hit harder, like a sudden acceleration after stillness. Resonance. With themes, control, and confinement. Musically, Transporter 3 is built around repetition, rhythm, and restriction. The beats are mechanical, almost like the locked gears of a machine, symbolizing Frank's tethered condition. Even the melodic cues repeat with slight variations, mimicking Frank's struggle to find freedom within constraint. At the same time, when Valentina disrupts his order, the music bends less predictable, more playful, even messy. Thematically, the film's soundscape mirrors its narrative arc, a man of rules colliding with a woman of chaos, their relationship transforming the rigid rhythms of survival into unexpected harmony, reception, and legacy of the score. Critics were divided on Olivier Megaton's directorial choices, but many acknowledged Alexandre Azaria's score as one of the stronger aspects of Transporter 3. Fans of the franchise praised how the music kept the energy alive, especially during car sequences, while some argued it leaned too heavily on generic techno. Others recognized its integration with sound design as a strength. In retrospect, the soundtrack stands as a marker of late 2000s action cinema, a time when electronic scores began to dominate fast-paced thrillers. For Transporter 3, this sonic style is not just aesthetic, but symbolic. The mechanical rhythms of engines, rules, and explosives, disrupted only by the fragile melodies of unexpected intimacy. Final reflection, the music of Transporter 3 is not simply an accessory to its action, it is the pulse of its story. Alexandre Aria crafts a score that oscillates between relentless rhythm and hesitant melody, capturing both the mechanical trap of Frank Martin's mission and the fragile humanity that emerges through his bond with Valentina. Engines roar in harmony with bass lines. Silence punctuates danger, and rebellious songs illuminate character flaws. The Emotional resonance lies not in sweeping orchestration, but in subtle contrasts. Cold against warmth, rigidity against freedom, machine against heart. In the end, the film's score ensures that Transporter 3 is more than just a ride. It is an experience where every beat, every silence, and every note becomes a reflection of confinement, connection, and the possibility of escape. Pre-production of Transporter 3, 2008. The story of Transporter 3, 2008 did not begin on the highways of Europe or in the fists of Jason Statham. It began in the conceptual and creative chambers of EuropaCorp, where Luc Besson and his collaborators envisioned how to continue the saga of Frank Martin without losing the franchise's identity. Pre-production was not merely about logistics. It was about redefining what the Transporter series meant in a shifting cinematic landscape while still honoring its roots as one of the most stylized action franchises of the 2000s. The need for a third film franchise continuity and evolution. By the time Transporter 2005 had concluded, Jason Statham's Frank Martin was firmly established as a cult action hero. The first film, 2002, had been a surprise success, mixing martial arts choreography with sleek European car culture, while the sequel expanded the formula into a more explosive Hollywood-style spectacle. A third film, therefore, had to balance two contradictory needs, return to the grounded roots of the original while still delivering the heightened adrenaline that audiences had come to expect. Luc Besson, co-creator and producer, recognized that the franchise needed to evolve beyond just flashy car stunts. The central gimmick of Transporter 3, the explosive bracelet that shackles Frank to his car, emerged during brainstorming sessions in early development. This device was more than a narrative hook. It was a metaphorical cage, ensuring that Frank could not simply abandon his mission. The writers wanted to impose limits on a character defined by control, forcing him into a situation where every step became dangerous. Writing and development, crafting the cage, Besson and Robert Mark came in return as screenwriters, ensuring continuity with the earlier films. Their goal was to inject a new kind of tension into the story, not just external threats, but internal restrictions. The explosive bracelet idea was central from the earliest drafts, designed to make the car itself not just a tool, but a prison. Another pre-production choice was to expand Frank Martin's emotional arc. Earlier films showed him as a man of strict rules, almost monk-like in his detachment. For Transporter 3, the writers wanted to peel back that armor. Enter Valentina, a character designed to disrupt Frank's control. Her fiery personality and inexperience contrasted sharply with Frank's discipline, creating conflict and reluctant intimacy. The writers intentionally introduced a romantic subplot to humanize Frank, even at the risk of dividing fans who preferred his colder professionalism. Casting choices. A risky discovery, pre-production took its boldest gamble in casting. Jason Statham was a given. His face was now inseparable from the franchise. But the female lead was far from certain. Luc Besson personally discovered Natalya Rudakova, a young woman with no acting experience, working as a hairdresser in New York. Impressed by her striking look, particularly her red hair and unconventional screen presence, Besson decided to cast her as Valentina. This decision became one of the most talked about aspects of pre-production. Rudakova was not trained, and critics later reflected on her rawness as either a flaw or a refreshing change. From Besson's perspective, however, she embodied authenticity, somewhat unpredictable and unpolished, the opposite of Frank's calculated discipline. In many ways, her casting symbolized the film's theme, chaos crashing into order, directorial shift. Olivier Megaton steps in. Another key pre-production decision was hiring Olivier Megaton as director, while Louisa had established the visual tone of the first two films. He had moved on to other projects, The Incredible Hulk. In 2008, Megaton was chosen for his darker, grittier visual sensibilities. In pre-production discussions, he pushed for a more industrial and oppressive tone compared to the glossy stylization of Transporter 2. This choice shaped everything from location scouting to cinematography. Megaton wanted to set the film in harsher, colder landscapes reflecting Frank's confinement. The team scouted extensively in France and Eastern Europe, selecting highways, industrial yards, and riverbanks that would emphasize decay and danger rather than luxury. Storyboarding and choreography, designing the stunts. The Transporter franchise is defined by action choreography, so pre-production involved meticulous storyboarding of fight and chase sequences. Statham, known for doing most of his own stunts, was actively involved in planning. Martial arts consultants worked with the stunt team to design sequences that emphasized Frank's precision and efficiency rather than flamboyance. The car chases were planned with equal detail. The bracelet gimmick dictated that Frank could never be far from his Audi, so stunt coordinators designed action sequences where the car was always central. One highlight involved the riverbank escape, requiring both real vehicles and specially modified rigs for safety. Early animatics were used to map timing, camera placement, and vehicle trajectories before a single wheel hit the road. Visual Identity Industrial Europe pre-production also focused heavily on the film's visual identity. Unlike the sunlit streets of Miami in Transporter 2, Transporter 3 would be steeped in steel and shadow. Production designers researched industrial regions in Eastern Europe to create an aesthetic of decay. Warehouses, rusting bridges, and train interiors became symbolic backdrops. The Audi A8, Frank's iconic car, was featured heavily in pre-production discussions. The filmmakers partnered with Audi to ensure the vehicle remained sleek, elegant, and integral to the story. In many ways, the car was treated like a co-star, polished and presented as Frank's most loyal companion. Thematic vision, confinement, and control. At the heart of pre-production planning was the theme of confinement. Everything, the bracelet, the industrial landscapes, the raw performance of Rudakova, the editing style was designed to reinforce a single question. What happens when a man defined by freedom and control is suddenly stripped of both? Pre-production did not aim to create a larger spectacle than its predecessors. Instead, it aimed to create a harsher emotional and psychological cage. In this sense, Transporter 3 represents not just another installment, but a recalibration of the franchise. Final reflection. The pre-production of Transporter 3 was a balancing act of risk and strategy. It took bold chances with casting, shifting tone, and introducing a narrative gimmick that redefined Frank Martin's identity. Jason Statham provided continuity, while Olivier Megaton's direction and Natalya Rudakova's raw unpredictability injected new energy. Storyboards, location scouting, and thematic design all revolved around a single idea to trap the transporter himself. What emerged from pre-production was not a glossy, effortless sequel, but a darker, riskier film that forced its hero into uncharted, emotional territory. Every decision, from the casting of a hairdresser to the scouting of bleak industrial landscapes, was part of a blueprint designed to cage speed itself. Filming of Transporter 3, 2008. If pre-production is the blueprint of a building, filming is the moment when steel, glass, and stone rise into the air and form a living structure. For Transporter 3, 2008, the filming process was more than just capturing Jason Statham in choreographed fights and high-speed car chases. It was about translating Olivier Megaton's darker industrial vision into motion. This stage transformed concepts of confinement, speed, and mechanical entrapment into tangible cinematic reality. Every choice of location, every stunt rehearsed, every camera placed carried the weight of an action film that wanted to distinguish itself from its predecessors while still keeping the adrenaline alive. Locations. The European industrial aesthetic. One of the defining aspects of Transporter 3 was its relocation from the glamorous settings of Transporter 2's Miami to the colder, more industrial landscapes of Europe. Shooting primarily in France and parts of Eastern Europe, the film embraced warehouses, railways, ports, and rusted urban backdrops. These were not coincidental choices. They were reflections of Frank Martin's prison-like condition, both literal and symbolic. Highways cutting through barren landscapes became racing strips of survival. Riverbanks and steel bridges were carefully chosen for chase sequences that could blend natural danger with human-made decay. The climax aboard a train was a logistical feat requiring extensive scouting and coordination, but it visually cemented the theme. Speed, steel, and confinement, all colliding in one claustrophobic environment. Jason? Statham's physical commitment. Filming hinged on Jason Statham's willingness to perform his own stunts. Known for rejecting body doubles wherever possible, Statham's presence on set was not just as an actor, but as a collaborator with stunt teams. His fight choreography was rehearsed intensively with the goal of maintaining his character's efficiency and precision. Unlike martial arts heroes who flaunt flamboyant moves, Frank Martin style was filmed to emphasize economy, short, brutal strikes, improvised weapon use, and swift takedowns. Behind the wheel, Statham was equally committed. Many of the car stunts used practical effects, with Statham often inside the vehicle. The production team outfitted the Audi with multiple modifications to ensure both safety and camera accessibility. Having Statham drive added authenticity. Audiences could see it was truly him gripping the wheel, and the camera never needed to hide a double's face. Stunt coordination, designing chaos, the bracelet gimmick that Frank could not move far from his car without risking death imposed unique challenges on the cast. Filming of action sequences. Choreographers and stunt designers had to plan scenes where Frank's car was always central. This led to dynamic action set pieces such as the Riverside Chase, where Frank battles both terrain and attackers while never straying far from his tether. Stunt coordinator Michel Julian and his team approached the driving scenes with mechanical precision. Every chase was broken down into beats: acceleration, drift, collision, narrow escape. Before filming, miniature models and digital pre-visualizations mapped out each movement. When cameras rolled, professional stunt drivers doubled for complex maneuvers, but Statham remained in control for as many sequences as insurance would allow. The train sequence posed perhaps the greatest logistical challenge. With limited space and moving machinery, every shot had to be rehearsed in detail. Fights inside train cars were filmed with handheld cameras to emphasize claustrophobia, while exterior shots of vehicles clashing with the train required complex rigging and timing. Camera work. Confinement through the lens. Giovanni Fior Coltellacci's cinematography during filming leaned toward confinement. Handheld cameras were frequently used in fight scenes, keeping the lens close to bodies in motion. This created an immediacy that threw the audience directly into the chaos, though some viewers later criticized the approach for reducing clarity. For car chases, multiple rigs were deployed. Chase cars, outfitted with camera arms, low-mounted rigs capturing tire-level shots, and helicopter cameras for wide tracking. The choice was always about immersion. The audience had to feel chained to Frank's Audi, as trapped as he was. Quick pans, whip zooms, and abrupt close-ups of the bracelet reinforced the ticking tension, reminding viewers of the stakes even during high-speed sequences. On-set atmosphere, discipline, and intensity. Filming in action. Thriller is not glamorous. It is repetitive, physically exhausting, and often dangerous. Statham's discipline set the tone for the set. Known for his non-nonsense approach, he worked closely with directors and choreographers, insisting on retakes until movements felt natural and authentic. His precision inspired the stunt team, who had to match his physical energy. Natalya Rudakova, in her first acting role, required additional guidance. Scenes between her and Statham often demanded multiple takes, not because of stunt complexity, but because of emotional nuance. Directors and crew worked to channel her inexperience into a raw performance that felt unpolished, but genuine. The mood on set was therefore a mixture of high intensity and experimentation. Statham driving precision, Rudakova bringing unpredictability, and Megaton orchestrating it all under the industrial aesthetic he envisioned. Challenges during filming. No production of this scale escapes difficulties. Weather was a constant obstacle. Shooting in Europe meant gray skies, rain, and unpredictable conditions that both enhanced and disrupted filming. Car chase sequences required dry roads for safety, leading to delays and rescheduling when weather turned unfavorable. The physical toll on Statham was also significant. Though he avoided major injury, his insistence on performing stunts meant long hours of rehearsals and shooting. Fight scenes left him bruised. While long driving days required precision focus, the train sequence in particular pushed the cast and crew to their limits, combining noise, confined space, and relentless repetition to capture every angle. Final. Reflection filming Transporter 3 was an act of translation, turning pre-production concepts into lived, dangerous reality. From Jason Statham's sweat-soaked commitment to stunt rehearsals to the industrial landscapes of Eastern Europe to the claustrophobic train battles, every day of filming was shaped by the central theme of confinement. The crew shot not just an action film, but an experience designed to make the audience feel trapped alongside Frank Martin, bound to his eyrie, his fists, and his mission. Through practical stunts, gritty cinematography, and relentless intensity, the filming process carved Transporter 3 into a distinctive entry in the franchise, rougher, darker, and forged in steel and sweat. Post-production of Transporter 3, 2008. If filming is the raw capture of performance, machinery, and movement, then post-production is where those raw materials are forged into a finished blade for Transporter 3, 2008. Post-production was not just an editing process, but a sculpting of rhythm, tone, and texture. Olivier Megaton's darker vision, Jason Statham's physical commitment, and the industrial landscapes of Europe all needed to be distilled into a coherent and relentless action film. The result was a movie that carried the DNA of its franchise, but leaned more heavily into grit and suffocation, shaped as much in the editing room and sound studios as on location. Editing the pulse of confinement editor Camille Demar's task was monumental to take the sprawling collection of car chases, hand-to-hand combat, and dialogue-driven tension and craft it into a consistent rhythm. Unlike Transporter 2, which emphasized sleek clarity and bledic stunts, Transporter 3 leaned into fragmentation. Delmare cut the action into short, sharp bursts, quick cuts between fists, tires, and impact points that created a sense of immediacy and claustrophobia. This editing style mirrored the central gimmick of the explosive bracelets. Just as Frank Martin's freedom was restricted by invisible boundaries, so too was the viewer's gaze restricted by the editing. Long takes of sweeping choreography gave way to compressed visual fragments, forcing audiences into Frank's disoriented perspective. Critics later debated whether this made the action thrilling or confusing, but there was no denying the stylistic intent. Editing was confinement, color grading, steel over sunlight. One of the most striking aspects of post-production was its color grading. Unlike the sun-drenched palette of Transporter 2's Miami setting, Transporter 3 embraced a colder, industrial color scheme. Blues, grays, and metallic silvers dominated the visual tone, echoing the film's themes of machinery and entrapment. Warm tones were rarely used, appearing only in intimate scenes between Frank and Valentina, where softer colors symbolize fleeting humanity within an otherwise mechanical world. This cold grading not only reflected the European industrial settings, but also amplified Olivier Megaton's directorial vision. The post-production team leaned into desaturation, stripping away glamour to emphasize grit. What emerged was a film that looked less like a glossy Hollywood actioner and more like a Euro thriller forged in steel. Visual effects, enhancing danger without overpowering reality. The Transporter franchise always relied heavily on practical stunts, and Transporter 3 was no exception. However, digital visual effects played a key supporting role. CGI was used to enhance dangerous sequences such as vehicle flips, the explosive bracelet visuals, and the climactic train standoff. The post-production team's challenge was to blend these enhancements seamlessly with the practical footage. To achieve this, editors combined digital effects with rapid cuts and motion blur, ensuring the audience never lingered long enough to question authenticity. While some viewers criticized these choices as masking clarity, they remained consistent with the film's larger aesthetic of suffocating fragmentation. Sound design engines as instruments. Sound in Transporter 3 was not treated as background, but as part of the film's heartbeat. Post-production sound engineers layered Foley effects, ADR, and ambient design to build a world where every punch, tire screech, and metallic clang carried weight. The roar of Frank's OD became almost musical, each rev and gear shift carefully amplified. The bracelet emitted subtle electronic hums and beeps, reminding both Frank and the audience of constant danger. Silence, too, became a sound choice. Moments of quiet before combat or chase sequences made the explosion of noise feel even more violent. ADR. Automated dialogue replacement was used extensively for dialogue in noisy environments, especially the train. Sequences where mechanical sound overwhelmed original recordings. Foley artists added texture shattering glass, crunching metal, fabric tearing, turning every physical interaction into a tactile experience. Music integration. Binding emotion to machinery, composer Alexandra Zaria's score was woven into the sound design during post-production. Pulsing electronic beats aligned with the rhythms of editing, creating a symphony of engines and bass lines. Car chases were cut in sync with musical tempo, ensuring that each acceleration or collision landed on a musical beat. For emotional sequences between Frank and Valentina, the music shifted to softer instrumentation, piano, ambient strings layered gently beneath dialogue. This integration of score with sound design ensured that even in a film dominated by machinery, the moments of human connection were underscored with sonic tenderness, test screenings, calibrating rhythm, and clarity. Like most large-scale action productions, Transporter 3 underwent test screenings before final release. Feedback highlighted divided reactions. Some praised the relentless pace, while others felt the editing obscured the clarity of action. The filmmakers trimmed and adjusted sequences accordingly, focusing on pacing rather than extended clarity. The romantic subplot between Frank and Valentina was also refined in post-production. Certain exchanges were trimmed to quicken the film's pace, but care was taken not to erase their thematic role in humanizing Frank. Test audiences were polarized, but producers believed the chemistry, though unconventional, added depth. The final cut, a blade of steel. By the end of post-production, Transporter 3 had been sculpted into a 104-minute film that reflected Olivier Megaton's vision. Darker, colder, and more claustrophobic than its predecessors. Editing had compressed action into fragments of velocity. Color grading had stripped glamour into steel, and sound design had turned engines into heartbeats. The final cut may have divided critics, but it achieved its purpose. It placed audiences inside Frank Martin's prison, forcing them to feel the suffocating weight of confinement. It was not a film designed for elegance. It was a film designed for intensity. Final reflection. Post-production is often the invisible hand that transforms raw footage into cinematic experience. For Transporter 3, that transformation was radical. The editing was intentionally fragmented, the color grading industrial, the soundscape mechanical, and the score integrated like a pulse. Together, these choices created a film that abandoned glossy spectacle for grit and suffocation. The brilliance of its post-production lies not in universal appeal, but in thematic cohesion. Every cut, every sound, every desaturated frame echoed the story's central question. What does freedom mean to a man chained to his car, his mission, and his own rules? In the hands of the post-production team, that question became not just narrative, but sensory, etched into every frame of the final film, budget, and box office. And box office collection of Transporter 3, 2008. Behind every explosion, every tire screech, and every meticulously staged fight sequence lies the question of resources. How much does it cost to bring an action thriller like Transporter 3 to life? And how much does the global audience reward that effort? The financial journey of the film is as fascinating as its narrative one, because it illustrates not only the mechanics of production, but also the economics of sustaining a franchise in the late 2000s. Budget, the cost of steel, stunts, and speed. Transporter 3 was produced with an estimated budget of around $30 million compared to Hollywood's towering blockbuster budgets at the time. Films like The Dark Knight, 2008 with $185 million, or Iron Man with $140 million. This was modest, yet for a European production operating under Europa Corp and Luc Besson's efficient model, it was significant. The budget allocation followed a clear hierarchy: stunts and practical effects. A substantial portion was dedicated to car sequences and fight choreography. Unlike CGI-heavy American blockbusters, the Transporter series thrived on practical stunts, requiring extensive planning, professional stunt drivers, vehicle modifications, and safety measures. The Riverside chase and train climax were some of the most expensive logistical undertakings of the production. Jason Statham's salary. By 2008, Statham was no longer a rising action star. He was an established name. His growing popularity from films like Crank 2006 and The Bank Job 2008 meant his paycheck reflected his star power. Reports suggest he earned around $68 million for the role, a significant chunk of the film's budget. Locations and production design. Shooting across France and Eastern Europe brought both cost-saving opportunities and logistical challenges. Industrial locations often came cheaper than glamorous cityscapes, but filming on trains and highways still demanded permits, insurance, and controlled environments, special effects, and post-production, though not effects-driven in the Hollywood sense. Visual enhancements, editing, and sound mixing absorbed notable resources. The cold metallic grading and sound integration with Aria's score were key investments to cement the film's atmosphere. Europa Corp, known for operating with tight financial efficiency, structured the production so that costs remained contained while maximizing on-screen spectacle. Box office, a global ride. Upon release in November 2008, Transporter 3 opened strong in Europe. Before expanding internationally, the film grossed approximately $19 million. Worldwide, more than tripling its production budget, domestic US and Canada around $31 million. While not a dominant figure compared to Hollywood blockbusters, it was respectable for a European-led action series. International, approximately $778 million, with particularly strong numbers in France, the UK, and Eastern Europe, where the setting and European action aesthetic resonated. The international box office was critical to its success. Luc Besson's Europa Corp had long understood that franchises like Transporter were built less for the American market and more for global audiences who appreciated high-speed action without necessarily demanding Hollywood-level star casts. Marketing and distribution. The Europa Corp formula. Marketing for Transporter 3 leaned heavily on Jason Statham's image. Posters and trailers foregrounded him in his iconic black suit, behind the wheel of the Audi, fists clenched and ready for combat. The car itself became part of the branding. Audi's collaboration with the franchise served both as product placement and as a stylistic anchor. Unlike Hollywood tentpoles that spent massive sums on global marketing, Transporter 3 had a relatively lean campaign estimated at $25 million. Still, with trailers, posters, and Statham's rising popularity, the film reached its target audience efficiently. Europa Corp distributed the film strategically, focusing on markets where Euro action films historically performed well. Profitability, a franchise that paid off when production costs and marketing are combined. The film's total expenditure likely hovered between $505 million, with a global gross of $19 million plus additional revenue streams from home video, streaming rights, and television licensing. Transporter 3 became a profitable venture. It was not a record-breaking blockbuster, but profitability was never the goal. It was about sustaining a mid-budget action franchise that could generate consistent returns. In that regard, Transporter 3 succeeded admirably, proving once again that tightly budgeted European action films could compete with Hollywood giants on the global stage. Legacy in numbers, the economics of continuation, the financial success of Transporter 3 cemented Jason Statham as an international action star. More. Importantly, it validated EuropaCorp's business model. Moderate budgets, heavy reliance on international markets, and action that emphasized clarity of stakes over heavy CGI spectacle. This success paved the way for spin-offs and reboots. A television series, Transporter, the series, emerged in 2012, though without Statham, and later in 2015, the franchise attempted a cinematic reboot, with the Transporter refueled. While those later projects lacked the same impact, they would not have existed without the box office foundation built by Transporter 3: Final Reflection. The financial story of Transporter 3 is one of balance and efficiency. With a $30 million budget, the filmmakers crafted a gritty stunt-driven thriller that went on to gross $19 million worldwide. It may not have competed with Hollywood Titans of the Year, but it didn't need to. It thrived in its own lane, proving that international audiences craved speed, grit, and Jason Statham's controlled fury. The film's budget shaped its identity. Practical stunts over CGI spectacle, industrial landscapes over glamorous cities, and character-driven action over mindless chaos. Its box office performance confirmed that there was room in the market for European mid-budget action films to flourish alongside Hollywood blockbusters. In the end, Transporter 3 was not just a financial success. It was a case study in how discipline, efficiency, and global vision can turn a modest budget into a profitable franchise entry. Like Frank Martin himself, the film never wasted movement. It delivered just enough to get the job done with style and precision, leaving both producers and audiences satisfied. Interesting facts about Transporter 3, 2008. Behind the roar of engines and the clash of fists lies a tapestry of fascinating details, accidents, experiments, and bold creative choices that shaped Transporter 3 into the film audiences know today. These stories, often hidden from the screen, reveal how much of the movie's identity was forged through unusual risks, technical ingenuity, and even moments of sheer unpredictability. Here are the most intriguing facts that make Transporter 3 stand apart in its franchise. 1. The discovery of Natalya Rudakova, a hairdresser turned actress. Perhaps the most famous fact about Transporter 3 is the unconventional casting of Natalya Rudakova as Valentina. She was not a professional actress when Luc Besson found her. In fact, Rudakova was working as a hairdresser in New York City, where Besson spotted her walking on the street. Struck by her distinct look, most notably her freckles and striking red hair, he decided she had the presence to carry the female lead. With no prior film experience, Rudakova underwent acting lessons during pre-production. Her raw performance drew polarized responses. Some critics dismissed it as amateurish, while others praised it as authentic and unpredictable regardless. Her casting remains one of the boldest risks in the franchise, emblematic of Besson's eye for unconventional talent. 2. Jason Statham's relentless stunt work. By the time Transporter 3 was filmed, Jason Statham had become synonymous with performing his own stunts. True to form, he insisted on personally executing as many driving and fight sequences as possible. One particularly dangerous stunt involved Statham maneuvering the Audi along a narrow riverbank, a sequence that combined speed, water hazards, and razor-thin margins for error. Statham's willingness to endure bruises and exhaustion became a hallmark of the production. His philosophy was simple. The audience should never question whether the man behind the wheel or throwing the punch was really Frank Martin. His dedication added not only authenticity but also tension for the crew, who often had to plan extra safety precautions around his insistence on being fully involved. 3. The explosive bracelet, a metaphor forged in production meetings. The central gimmick of Transporter 3, the explosive bracelet tethering Frank Martin to his car, was not just a narrative device, but also a product of brainstorming sessions during early development. The creative team wanted a mechanism that would simultaneously raise the stakes and limit Frank's usual freedom. The idea drew inspiration from several sources: science fiction tropes of explosive collars, electronic monitoring bracelets used in law enforcement, and the franchise's recurring theme of rules and restrictions. In execution, it forced the filmmakers to design action sequences where Frank's car was always present, reshaping not just the story, but also the stunt choreography. 4. Industrial Europe, a stylistic choice and a logistical challenge. Unlike the sun-soaked Miami setting of Transporter 2, this installment chose bleak industrial landscapes in France and Eastern Europe. Director Olivier Megaton wanted the world to feel colder and grittier, echoing the mechanical themes of control and confinement. This meant shooting in working factories, ports, and train yards, which came with practical challenges. Noise, weather, and safety hazards constantly disrupted filming. But these real-world environments gave the film its distinctive steel and shadow aesthetic, setting it apart visually from its predecessors. 5. The train sequence. A technical ordeal. The climactic showdown aboard a moving train was one of the most difficult sequences to film. Shooting on an actual moving train was too dangerous and impractical. So, the production team built elaborate sets combined with second unit work for exterior shots. Handheld cameras were used for interior fight scenes to create claustrophobia, while rigs and practical explosions heightened the sense of danger. This sequence consumed weeks of production time and a significant slice of the budget. It remains one of the most complex set pieces of the franchise. 6. Product placement. Audi is a co-star. The Audi A8 was not just Frank Martin's car. It was a deliberate piece of product placement. Audi partnered with Europa Corp to feature their vehicle as the Transporter's signature ride. In fact, the Audi brand became so entwined with the franchise that fans began to see the car as Frank's true partner, his constant companion in a world of betrayal and danger. The film's pre-release marketing leaned heavily on the sleek design of the car, underscoring how vital it was to the visual and commercial identity of the series. 7. Olivier Megaton's first major action feature. Although Olivier Megaton had directed before, Transporter 3 was his first large-scale, internationally distributed action blockbuster. His darker, more industrial style divided fans, with some missing the glossy clarity of Louise's earlier installments. Nonetheless, Megaton's work on this film positioned him for bigger projects under Europa Corp, including Colombiana 2011 and Taken 2. 2012, critical polarization and fan divisions. An interesting fact about the film's reception is how sharply divided critics and fans were. While audiences generally embraced the film for its high-octane thrills, critics pointed out flaws in editing, pacing, and casting. Yet, despite these criticisms, Transporter 3 performed strongly at the box office, cementing Jason Statham's global action star reputation. This division between critical response and audience enthusiasm became part of the film's legacy. 9. Jason Statham's grueling shooting schedule. During filming, Statham endured an exhausting physical routine. He trained daily to maintain peak condition, rehearsed fight choreography with the stunt team, and then spent long hours shooting intense physical scenes. Reports from the set describe him as stoic and focused, often demanding multiple retakes until the movements felt authentic. His discipline shaped the on-set atmosphere, inspiring both respect and caution among crew members. 10. The franchise pivot from film to expanded universe. The commercial success of Transporter 3 helped inspire further exploration of the brand, including Transporter the Series 2012, 2014, and eventually the reboot Transporter Refuel 2015. While neither achieved the same success as the Statham trilogy, their existence can be traced directly back to the financial and cultural momentum of the third film. Final reflection. The fascinating stories surrounding Transporter 3 reveal how much of its identity came from risk-taking, improvisation, and raw ambition. From Luke Besson plucking a hairdresser off the streets of New York to Jason Statham insisting on punishing stunt work. From the invention of the explosive bracelet to the train sequence's logistical ordeal, the film was built on daring decisions. These behind-the-scenes truths are more than trivia. They help explain why Transporter 3 feels both roughed and authentic. It was not polished into Hollywood perfection. It was forged through experiments, bruises, and bold, creative gambles. Like Frank Martin himself, the film thrives on tension between control and chaos, precision and unpredictability. And that tension, more than anything, is what keeps audiences returning to its world of that speed and steel. Audience reception and critical acclaim of Transporter 3, 2008. When Transporter 3 hit theaters in late 2008, it entered a cinematic landscape dominated by superhero blockbusters like The Dark Knight and Iron Man. In such a climate, Olivier Megaton's darker, grittier take on Frank Martin's saga carried both expectations and risks. Would audiences embrace the franchise's evolution into a more industrial, suffocating tone, or would they long for the slick, glossy spectacle of its predecessors? The answer lies in the fascinating divide between general audiences and professional critics. 2. Groups whose responses painted very different portraits of the film's legacy. Audience reception, a thrill ride that delivered for audiences, especially longtime fans of Jason Statham and the franchise. Transporter 3 provided what they came for, a dose of adrenaline wrapped in sharp suits, roaring engines, and fists that struck like precision tools. Many viewers praised Statham's unwavering commitment to the role, applauding his refusal to rely on stunt doubles. His authenticity behind the wheel and in hand-to-hand combat gave the film a visceral thrill that fans found irresistible. Audiences also embraced the film's high-speed chase sequences, particularly the riverbank escape and the climactic train showdown. These moments, brimming with danger and mechanical poetry, reinforced the franchise's identity as one of the most dependable providers of mid-budget action thrills in the 2000s. However, the reception was not universally positive. Some audience members found the romance between Frank and Valentina unconvincing, citing a lack of chemistry and awkward dialogue. Others criticized the editing style for being too choppy, arguing that it obscured the clarity of stunts they wanted to savor. Still, the general consensus among fans leaned toward appreciation. Transporter the Third may not have been flawless, but it delivered the spectacle and danger they expected from Frank Martin. Critical response divided and skeptical. If audiences were mostly forgiving, critics were less kind. Reviews ranged from lukewarm to scathing, with many pointing out that Olivier Megaton's direction lacked the fluid elegance of Louisier's earlier films. The frequent use of rapid cuts in fight sequences was a particular sticking point. Critics argued that it undermined the franchise's strength in the showcasing physical choreography. Natalya Rudakova's performance as Valentina was another focal point of that criticism. While some admired Luc Besson's daring in casting an untrained actress, most reviewers found her delivery stilted and her chemistry with Statham underwhelming. For them, the central romance felt forced, dragging you down an otherwise efficient action vehicle. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film scored poorly, with less than 40% of critics offering positive reviews. Common phrases included formulaic, uninspired, and over-edited. Yet even within these criticisms, some reviewers acknowledged the film's relentless energy and Statham's undeniable charisma. He was often singled out as the saving grace of an otherwise uneven installment box office success. The audience speaks louder despite mixed critical reviews. The numbers told a different story, grossing around $109 million worldwide on a $30 million budget. Transporter 3 was a clear financial success. Audiences showed up in large numbers, proving that word of mouth and Statham's growing international stardom carried more weight than negative reviews. The international market was particularly receptive. European audiences embraced the industrial landscapes and Euro thriller atmosphere, while fans in Asia and Latin America found the blend of sleek cars, martial arts, and gritty tone appealing. The film's success reaffirmed EuropaCorp's model of crafting mid-budget action movies designed for global, not just American, consumption. Fan community, a polarized legacy within the fan base. Transporter 3 occupies an intriguing place. Many fans argue it is the weakest entry in the original trilogy, citing its darker tone, fragmented editing, and lack of the pure, stylish fun that defined Transporter 2. Yet others appreciate its grittier approach, claiming that it adds psychological weight to Frank Martin's story and expands his character beyond the man with rules. The film also sparked debates about Valentina as a character. While some dismissed her as underdeveloped, others defended her as a deliberate counterbalance to Frank's cold professionalism. Over time, this division has cemented. Transporter 3 is the controversial chapter of the trilogy, one that fans continue to revisit and debate. Critical acclaim, small but notable, although largely criticized. Transporter 3 did receive pockets of praise. Some European critics appreciated Megaton's industrial aesthetic, noting that it grounded the franchise in a more realistic, claustrophobic environment. A few also admired the way the explosive bracelet concept heightened tension, adding a psychological dimension to Frank's otherwise physical challenges. Jason Statham's performance was the one element nearly all critics respected. Even in negative reviews, Statham was acknowledged as a disciplined, magnetic presence who elevated material that might otherwise have felt flat. His transformation into a reliable, global action star was cemented here, even if the film itself divided opinion. Final reflection: the reception of Transporter 3 is a story of contrasts. For audiences, it was a solid, if imperfect, thrill ride, kept alive by Jason Statham's charisma and the adrenaline of its car chases. For critics, it was an over-edited, formulaic sequel that fell short of the franchise's potential. Yet in the numbers, the audience voice proved louder. The film was a commercial hit, and it solidified both STM's global reputation and the viability of EuropaCorp's mid-budget action model. In retrospect, Transporter 3 stands not as the most beloved installment of the trilogy, but as its most polarizing. Its reception reflects the eternal tug-of-war between audience satisfaction and critical appraisal, between the visceral thrill of speed and the intellectual demand for cinematic clarity. And perhaps, like Frank Martin himself, the film endures because it straddles that very tension, refusing to fit neatly into one judgment. Final review and cinematic verdict of Transporter 3 2008. Every film is more than the sum of its parts, and Transporter 3 2008 is a fascinating case study of how strengths, flaws, risks, and audience expectations collide on the screen. It is not the sleek, sun-drenched ballet of Transporter 2, nor the tightly contained thrill ride of the first installment. Instead, Olivier Megaton's film is a darker, more industrial beast, raw around the edges, fragmented in rhythm, but still carried by Jason Statham's ironclad presence. To render a final verdict, one must look at the film not only as entertainment, but as an evolution of a franchise, trying to stretch its identity, the emotional resonance. Frank Martin. Unchained and Rebound. At its heart, Transporter 3 dares to tinker with the humanity of Frank Martin. Earlier films painted him as a monk-like courier bound by rules with emotions suppressed behind a wall of precision. Here, the script attempts to crack that facade, forcing him into intimacy with Valentina, a woman who represents chaos, rebellion, and emotional vulnerability. The result is uneven but intriguing. Their romance is far from universally convincing, yet it does something essential. It humanizes Frank. He is no longer just the man who never misses a delivery. He becomes a man who is forced to confront his own loneliness. This emotional expansion adds texture to the franchise, even if the execution falters at times. Technical execution. Style is confinement from a technical standpoint. The film is defined by confinement. Camille Demar's editing cuts the action into jagged fragments, placing viewers inside the claustrophobia of Frank's predicament. Giovanni Fiore-Codolachi's cinematography paints Europe in cold steel, stripping away glamour for grit. Alexandre Zaria's music pulses with mechanical rhythms, echoing both speed and suffocation. These choices make the film feel heavier, less flashy, and more industrial than its predecessors. Critics derided the editing for obscuring clarity, but in truth, it was a stylistic gambit to trap the audience in Frank's cage, unable to breathe freely until the final escape. Whether this was effective or frustrating depends on the viewer, but it undeniably gave the film a unique identity within the trilogy. Performances: A Tale of Two Leads. Jason Statham is the film's anchor, and his performance remains the single strongest reason to watch. His physical authenticity, stoic charisma, and sharp precision elevate every scene, reminding audiences why Frank Martin became one of the most iconic action characters of the 2000s. Natalya Rudakova, in her acting debut, is the film's greatest gamble. Her untrained, raw delivery split both critics and audiences. For some, it derailed the film's credibility. For others, it offered a refreshing unpredictability that matched Valentina's rebellious spirit. Regardless of perspective, her presence ensures that Transporter 3 cannot be accused of playing it safe. Thematic core rules, restrictions, and rebellion. The explosive bracelet is not just a plot device. It is the film's metaphor. Frank, a man defined by rules, control, and freedom behind the wheel, finds himself tethered, suffocated, and caged. Valentina becomes the counterbalance. Chaos breaking into order, freedom breaking into discipline. Their relationship, like the film itself, is a tug-of-war between precision and disorder. This theme of confinement reverberates across every element of the film: the industrial locations, the jagged editing, the cold color palette, the mechanical score. If the earlier Transporter films were about the thrill of motion, Transporter 3 is about the weight of restriction, audience versus critics. The Great Divide audiences, by and large, embrace the film as another adrenaline shot of Frank Martin's world. They forgave its uneven romance and embraced its chases, stunts, and Statham's stoicism. Critics, however, were less forgiving, calling it formulaic, over-edited, and lacking elegance. This division underscores the film's identity as a fan-driven success rather than a critical darling. Its financial performance, $109 million worldwide on a $30 million budget, proved that audiences still wanted Frank Martin, even if reviewers were skeptical. The box office did not just validate the film, it validated the franchise's longevity. Cinematic verdict. Road, a divisive ride transporter. 3 is not the best of its trilogy. It is not as tightly constructed as the first, nor as flamboyantly entertaining as the second, but it is the boldest in tone. Willing to sacrifice polish for grit, clarity for claustrophobia, and safety for risk. It stands as the most divisive entry in the series. And yet that very divisiveness gives it staying power. For fans, it delivers enough high-speed thrills, brutal fights, and Jason Statham intensity to satisfy. For critics, it falters in execution, weighed down by uneven performances and overzealous editing. But in retrospect, its willingness to shift tone and style gave the franchise a necessary jolt, pushing it beyond repetition and into new thematic territory. Transporter 3 is not a flawless vehicle, but it is a sturdy one. Built with steel, grit, and raw energy, it carries Frank Martin into darker terrain, proving that even when chained, he remains one of cinema's most reliable action heroes. Final. Reflection. The cinematic verdict of Transporter 3 is clear. It is an imperfect but essential chapter in the Mike franchise. Its risks make it memorable, its flaws make it human, and its relentless speed ensures it never stalls. For better or worse, it is a film that dares to confine its hero only to prove that even in chains, Frank Martin cannot be stopped. A question to begin with. What happens when a man who lives by a strict set of rules suddenly finds his freedom tied to an explosive leash? Can discipline, skill, and sheer instinct save him from a trap that tests not just his speed, but his humanity? Narrative overview, directed by Olivier Megaton. Transporter 3 is the third entry in the adrenaline-fueled franchise, starring Jason Statham as Frank Martin. Released in 2008 by EuropaCorp, the film blends Euro action aesthetics with the precision of Luc Besson's production vision. Alongside Statham, Natalya Rudakova stars as Valentina, while Francois Berléand reprises his role as Inspector Tyrone. The story follows Frank, a professional driver bound by a personal code, forced into another high-stakes delivery job. This time, he must escort Valentina, the kidnapped daughter of a Ukrainian official, across Europe. The twist? Both Frank and Valentina wear explosive bracelets, sync to his car, step too far away, and they die. The journey becomes a survival race, filled with mobsters, betrayals, and an unexpected romance. Storytelling in motion. The film's central image is visceral. Frank tethered to his car, locked in an intimate dance with speed itself. Each chase feels like a metaphor for control. Frank cannot outrun his fate, yet he must drive forward. Valentina's presence shifts the tone. What begins as duty evolves into reluctant tenderness, contrasting Frank's stoic professionalism with vulnerable intimacy. Star cast and performances: Jason Statham, Frank Martin, cool precision, iron discipline, and that razor-sharp combat choreography define his return. Statham balances physical brutality with a subtle weariness, grounding Frank's morality in a world of corruption. Natalya Rudakova, Valentina as the fiery, red-haired daughter. Rudakova embodies fragility mixed with rebellion. Her chemistry with Statham, though unconventional, injects emotional conflict into the otherwise mechanical plot. Francois Berléand, Inspector Tyrone, provides levity and human warmth, his friendship with Frank being one of the most endearing through lines of the trilogy. Robert Knepper, Johnson the villain, cold, manipulative, and quietly sadistic. Knepper brings nuance to a role that could easily have been one note. Technical department Olivier Megaton directs with a grittier style than his predecessors. The cinematography emphasizes metallic palettes, gray highways, industrial wastelands, and rainy European cityscapes. Action sequences, particularly the train climax, rely on practical stunts stitched with sharp editing. However, some critics felt the shaky cam diluted the clarity of fight. Choreography compared to Transporter 2, music and emotional resonance. The soundtrack mirrors the franchise's tech-driven heartbeat. Alexandra Azaria's score blends pulsing electronic beats with orchestral flourishes, underlining both the cold mechanics of Frank's world and the growing emotional undertones between him and Valentina. Pre-production, Luc Besson and Robert Mark Kamen returned as writers, crafting a script that anchored the film's explosive gimmick, the tethered bracelet concept. The creative intent was to heighten tension by physically chaining Frank to his car, making every chase sequence more claustrophobic. Casting Rudakova, a newcomer discovered by Besson in New York, was a bold choice. Her raw, unpolished performance intentionally clashed with Statham's discipline, creating an unpredictable energy. Filming shot across France and Ukraine, the film leaned heavily on authentic European backdrops. Statham, known for performing most of his own stunts, once again pushed physical boundaries, particularly in hand-to-hand combat sequences. The vehicular choreography, tight alleys, precision drifts, and a standout river escape showcased meticulous stunt coordination. Megaton sets often emphasize confinement, warehouses, trains, narrow roads, echoing the trapped motif. Post-production editing leaned toward fast cuts and kinetic pacing, sometimes sacrificing clarity for intensity. Color grading leaned heavily into cold steel blues, visually reinforcing the mechanical theme. Sound design highlighted engine roars, metallic clashes, and the rhythmic ticking of time-bound danger. While CGI enhancements appeared in select scenes and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.